Sano and Opal are visiting the anime with probably one of the best anime openings of all time. Probably second place next to Gintama opening 1, but maybe it's the best. I'll leave that to you guys in the comments. Chainsaw Man. Unfortunately, I lost early sketch footage for this, so I'm just kind of deleting the faces and redrawing them for you guys, just so you guys have some reference to stuff that you can actually look at. I reference their Reservoir Dog suits for the most part. I hear the creator of Chainsaw Man is a big Tarantino fan, so hence all the references, and you can catch a lot of those references in the opening as well. But not just Tarantino, a bunch of Western media as well. Even in the way the series is put together, which I think helped it stand out a great deal, and I found it very entertaining. Opal here still having a lot of the things that make her Opal-y, but I made everything a little bit more demonic. The jewelry that she has on her forehead, instead of like a little gem, it's kind of like an eyeball, like a devil, demonic eyeball. Decided to throw in Mikhail in this one, and here I used the teacher guy as a reference here, so I gave him a little bit more scars, made them edgier a little bit, gave him the same coats that the character wore, similar colors. At least you'll see that when I'm putting it in the flats. And then for Sano, gave him his arm, but now it's all kind of like a devil arm. So here maybe Sano is a demon, like a devil or a fiend. And I never really knew the difference. You guys can let me know what the difference is in the comments below. It was one of those things that I never fully grasped. Like, I knew they explained it, but I don't know if it hit. Like, practically I know the difference, but just watching the show, it was irrelevant what that difference was. I used Denji's reference, I used Makima's reference, Kobeni's reference, Aki a little bit, so I decided to put Sano's hair as kind of like a blend of what it normally is with Aki. Similar colors. I made the Rota's arm look a little bit more devilish, or at least something that will fit this world. And I decided to have the hand be oversized. And then I took Orion and made Orion this giant devil with probably one of my favorite designs, at least weird designs that I've ever done. And then gave Orion a bunch of BOOBs, if you know what I'm saying. That weirdness, that awkwardness, that uniqueness of Chainsaw Man, I try my best to capture that while still capturing key factors in iconography about my characters during this sketch. I also noticed that all the characters with their suits still wore sneakers, especially the younger characters, so I stayed true to that. But then for Opal, I decided to give her Timbs, because why not? Maybe they're not in Tokyo, maybe they're in New York, or some made up version that's like a blend. What, Neo Yokio, maybe? They gotta have devils there too, right? Did a little bit of reference for that and made sure to put that together. I just felt it was appropriate. Stomp them devils out with them Timbs. From New York. The line art for Chainsaw Man is pretty thin, like thin. Everything's very crisp. The animation was beautiful to look at. Probably one of the best looking anime that I've seen in quite a while. Especially for anime that isn't like a feature-length film and just like a weekly type thing. Obviously not perfect, but definitely had its moments. Make sure to give Sano the fiend, devil, sharp teeth. I don't know, maybe he's a demon fiend. I don't know. Y'all can let me know in the comments what Sano is at this point. He has a contract with the god devil. With the suits, I noticed there are a lot of folds, and the folds look very realistic. Obviously everything is stylistic, it's Japanese animation, but for the most part the folds are very true to form and realistic in many ways. With the female characters, I use a lot of them as reference. There aren't any black ones that I've seen, so I had to wing it a little bit, but I still use Makima for the most part as reference for the type of orange hair that we'll be using here, and even Opal's eyes to a degree. Still thicker lashes at the top, especially for female characters. Then Mikhail with the suit and the cigarettes, the same coat, the same way it will fold, all of that was taken into account. His beard, initially I had it really clean, but I've noticed that it's actually quite messy. So I changed it, switched that up, and had it be just as messy. Again, to be in tune with the anime style of Chainsaw Man that MAPPA put together. This three-eyed demon, this design, there are many aspects of it that I really like. Again, it's similar to the original Orion design from the Apple Black manga. But my favorite part here is the flowers in the mouth. Hear me out. I think this is one of my most creative ideas ever. Because essentially this character has no like teeth, at least not in the general sense or the way you think of teeth. Here I have it be roses and thorns, and maybe it's like super devilishly sharp. Maybe it's like super devilishly sharp thorns and roses that essentially flood all corners of the mouth. The mouth is kind of split in different ways, similar to like a Stranger Things. And imagine maybe some parts of the like vines and thorns can stretch out and pull people in, and imagine being chewed by all kinds of thorns with flowers and petals and vines all in the mouth. Just screw the blood is indistinguishable from the red roses. Such a beautiful death. And I think creatively that is a sinister yet beautiful replacement for teeth. Like, this is something I'll probably pull into Apple Black and keep for myself. If you see this anywhere else, just know who did it first. You know, this is one of those things that I think I've done that gets a lot of originality points. It's beautiful and scary at the same time. Yeah. For now, I'm just doing a lot of that MAPPA magic, giving it some mood, giving it some mood and shading. Obviously, I'm filling it here with like a hue of blue. You can see it in the corner, bottom left, with the color wheel, linear burn blending mode, and reduce the opacity. One could argue that maybe I didn't need it in this case, but I usually put it, and if I don't need it as much, I just reduce the opacity accordingly. But then I have another layer, the same blending mode, with higher opacity for the shading. And again, the shading is very true to form, very realistic, with like actual clothing folds, even though it's a stylistic anime. So I just have the same approach. Try to shade as realistic as possible while still being, you know, anime stylistic. But again, all in the name of Le Chainsaw Man. Some of the folds, you know, I didn't want to overdo it, so I still had a lot of the characters in their suits as reference. I also noticed some things about the shading where sometimes when there's like a lot of shading, there's like a negative shading a little bit in some corners. It's very subtle, but I made sure to add that in here. Backgrounds, very tricky. I decided to go all out. Backgrounds are very difficult to pull off, especially if, you know, this is an illustration I don't want to spend so much time on, because I have a bunch of other things to do. But I gave this a little bit more time. First started with the windows. You can kind of have this separately, and then you kind of slap it on the illustration later on. But with a perspective guide, I make sure to put the buildings in place based off of the sketch. I'm using one of the Chainsaw Man promotional posters as reference, trying to recapture that power. Such a beautiful illustration. I'm slapping those windows on there and just filling in the gaps, adding the sky, painting the clouds. The way the clouds are painted here are different from all the other ways we've painted it in the past. For like example, with the One Piece one or the Attack on Titan one, this one is very different. Again, also still very realistic looking. Then the buildings kind of had a shadow on them, and this time I decided to draw a shadow. Maybe it's a shadow of a giant devil casting their shadow based off of the light source behind them. I thought that would make things interesting, maybe tentacles. The show is kind of raunchy. And really it's like an extra layer, still linear burn, but you can experiment with other blending modes and you reduce the opacity, and then I use an airbrush to really form these shadows. Now I'm having the character stand on rocks, painting the rocks accordingly, and eventually when I'm done painting the rocks, using the initial image as reference, I'll kind of have a texture go over all the rocks and really give it that realistic look. Just adding the texture, mixing it up, having different versions, flipping them, making sure they blend nicely, and then I clip them to the rocks and then play with the blending modes and opacities. I also then take another shading, linear burn, opacity layer, and then really make it pop. Then I have another layer clipped to the line art, and I'm making some parts of the line art white. This is something you also notice that they do in the anime, especially when a light source is really hitting them. Maybe sunlight or something like that. The line art in those areas are just straight up white. Very unique approach to line art, helps things stand out. I also imagine animating all of this would have been a nightmare, so kudos to them. And after that, now I'm just laying down the flats, using the eyedropper tool to get some exact colors. I'm also giving Santa a halo because, you know, maybe he's this god devil blend. And then he also has this halo, which the angel devil has. And so I'm keeping this simplistic, just like the angel devil, but this is Sano's version. Adding in the colors for, honestly, probably my favorite part of this whole illustration, which is the flower teeth. I'm putting a lot of eyeballs. Eyeballs can be very creepy, so slapping that all over the demon or the devil. Using the appropriate opal Orion colors and knocking it out the park. And then for the final touches for that Chainsaw Man energy, we have everything turned on, but we need more blood. We need some blood. So we're gonna throw some blood stains on Sano and honestly all of the characters to a degree. Blood stains on the rocks. And then some blood splattering all over the illustration, but then I'm gonna put a blur on them, some kind of motion blur. Some coming from Orion's mouth. Shitting in that blood is gonna have like a darker hue, a lighter hue, and a medium hue of all the reds. And then I'm gonna blur it all with the motion blur to really sell it. This part I'm doing in Photoshop. You can save files in Clip Studio Paint as PSDs and open them in Photoshop. If you want to kind of mix and match some of the tools, it's much easier to do some of this filter stuff in Photoshop, so I'm just doing it here. Adding the glow to the parts of Sano's Orotis arm that I want to glow, the halo, putting the motion blur on the blood, doing the anime look where you copy all the layers, create duplicates, merge the duplicates, give that duplicate a blur of about 30, maybe a 30 Gaussian blur, reduce the opacity to like 40, and then leave it on a lighten blending mode. But then after that, I'll do like chromatic aberration. And you can see a little bit of the chromatic aberration in Chainsaw Man. It's not in every frame, but it's on certain frames, especially in the opening. Where we do a little bit of that chromatic aberration, you create even more duplicates, you flatten that out, you then go to channels, hit green, and then hit the eye so that everything is on while on the green. Select the whole image and just kind of shift it to create that glitch 3D looking vibe. But it's very subtle. I have other videos that go into more detail if you want to get all these anime looks to a T and really understand everything that I'm doing. But these videos are just me trying to figure out how they look based off of the reference. And in this case, we got Chainsaw Man. So let me know what you guys thought. Did we nail it? Does it look good? What's their story? What's her contract with Orion? What's Mikhail's deal? What's the God Devil about? Check out my series Apple Black. Get some Apple Black merch. Apple Black Volume 1 to 4 available. Check out other videos where these characters visit other anime worlds. Swipe manga. And I'm Audi 9000.